You finish your meal, the waiter drops the leather folder on the table, and you glance at the check. Like millions of diners, you see a 10% service charge printed at the bottom and pay it without a second thought. Most consumers assume this line item is a mandatory administrative fee. It looks exactly like a government tax, cleanly printed right below your food total. This assumption regarding the nature of the charge sits at the center of a major regulatory conflict. Whether a restaurant can add this fee without your active prior consent has become a defining question for consumer protection authorities. The scale of this conflict is immense. In July 2026, the Central Consumer Protection Authority, or CCPA, launched suo moto action against 41 major restaurant chains for routinely forcing this charge onto customers. When a massive corporate sector systematically extracts fees from millions of diners without explicit agreement, it requires strict structural regulatory intervention. Under Section 10 of the Consumer Protection Act of 2019, the CCPA issued explicit guidelines. Restaurants cannot add service charges by default, they cannot rename them to trick customers, and they cannot refuse service if a customer declines to pay. The restaurant industry lobbied hard against these rules, but in March 2025, the Delhi High Court decisively struck down their petitions, cementing the CCPA's guidelines into law. The court's rationale was precise. By mimicking a government tax, a mandatory service charge inherently misleads the consumer. Legally, the court classified this tactic as an unfair trade practice. Union Minister Prahlad Joshi confirmed the active imposition of penalties, making it clear that the government is enforcing this mandate against ongoing violations. Imagine you are a regional operations manager for a mid-sized restaurant chain. Your head office orders you to retain the illegal charge. Their solution is to simply rename it a convenience fee and keep adding it by default. A junior manager on your team officially flags this directive as illegal. As the regional manager, you are trapped between obeying your corporate superiors and complying with federal law. This is a direct collision between explicit corporate directives designed to protect revenue and uncompromising legal mandates protecting consumer rights. Our ethics matrix reveals 3 fault lines. First, letter versus spirit. Deceptive fees violate informed consent. Second, means versus ends. Staff welfare is valid, but hidden pricing is invalid. Third, whistleblower dilemma. The junior risks moral guilt. The regional manager risks career security. Any administrative strategy relying on deception fails the baseline test of corporate integrity, even if the money is ultimately used to pay the waitstaff. Let's evaluate the options available to the regional manager, starting with blind compliance. You simply follow the HQ directive. Blind compliance secures short-term revenue and protects your immediate job, but it creates a highly fragile business model. The CCPA is actively auditing receipts. When caught, the company faces massive fines and reputational ruin. The second option is moral evasion. You silently comply with the order, but privately note your dissent to human resources. This option fails the integrity test. It protects your personal conscience, but it allows the actual financial harm to the consumers to persist. The third option is direct refusal. You reject the order and force compliance across your regional branches. While legally sound, direct refusal is an incomplete administrative action. It stops the illegal fee, but it ignores the operational reality of the waitstaff, who suddenly lose 10. You guarantee staff income through higher menu prices or adjusted base pay, removing their reliance on disguised consumer fees. The third pillar requires you to formally and visibly support the junior manager who raised the alarm. This builds a resilient institutional culture that protects ethical whistleblowers instead of punishing them. By addressing the root cause of salary insecurity alongside legal compliance, this model removes the conflict between corporate revenue and consumer rights. To prove the validity of this structural resolution, we must stress test it against classical philosophical frameworks, beginning with Immanuel Kant. Under Kant's categorical imperative, you must act only according to a maxim that you would want to become a universal law. If every business universally disguised its fees and manipulated invoices, the entire market system of trust would collapse. We apply the utilitarian perspective of John Stuart Mill, evaluating the competing outcomes of the deception. The deception provides a short-term, concentrated financial gain for the restaurant staff, but weighed against the long-term, widespread erosion of trust among millions of consumers, the hidden fee completely fails the utilitarian test. When deceptive pricing becomes the industry standard, it forces consumers into a defensive posture. This erosion of confidence ultimately reduces the frequency of transactions across the entire hospitality sector, harming the market more than a transparent price increase would. We look to Mahatma Gandhi's concept of corporate trusteeship to redefine the purpose of the business. Under trusteeship, corporations are not merely profit generation engines for shareholders. They are ethical stewards of society's resources and consumer trust. Returning to Aristotle's virtue ethics, true corporate leadership requires the practical wisdom to find balance and solve operational problems, rather than hunting for legal loopholes. The CCPA's suo motu actions offer a stark administrative lesson. Tactics designed to hide transparency are always eventually exposed. When the regulator steps in, the systemic damage far outweighs any temporary revenue gains. The CCPA's enforcement demonstrates that transparency is an operational necessity. True corporate leadership requires practical wisdom to design systems protecting the consumer and the workforce simultaneously.